Welcome to the Cannabis Community Insider. I'm your host, Penelope Hamilton, and I am so excited to let you in on this very special episode today. You know, we advocates and states have worked so hard on social equity and racial justice and reform as the core reason, really, why we wanted to get cannabis legalized. And without these ladies that I've got here today to share with you, I don't think equity is going to be possible in this industry. So I'm honored and very excited to introduce them and hear from them and find out what they're doing to help people. We have Shawnee Williams with us. Shawnee is the co-founder of Illinois Equity Staffing, along with her other co-founder, Lynette Johnson, who couldn't be with us today. And they're a minority-owned and women-owned firm based in Chicago that supports the cannabis industry in education, job placement, human resources, payroll, and social equity and diversity compliance. Together, those women, with their wealth of knowledge and experience, they know the pains that the actual people in these communities are going through and what their needs are from their own personal experience. So, what better way to be able to reach out? And my other guest is Danielle Shumacher, whose mission is to perpetuate diversity and inclusion in the legal cannabis industry. And Danielle is the CEO of THC Staffing Group. And I can't wait to hear from both of you, and welcome and tell us about what you are doing and your programs that you have.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us, Penelope. So Danielle and I are collaborating and partnering this year to work on Second Chance Initiative for the cannabis industry. Currently, we're working with Curaleaf in 10 different states. So a lot of people ask us how it all came about. And I think there's a few different ways it came about. At the end of the day, a lot of us have the same objectives. We want to see diversity, equity, inclusion in the cannabis industry, but a lot of us are going about it in different ways in our own path. For me personally, here in Illinois, after we kind of saw what happened with the standstill of the lottery and the licenses not happening here in Illinois and the aftermath, I think a lot of us tried our best during the pandemic to meet virtually and to collaborate and come up with possible solutions to the issues that we had here with our regulation and our law in Illinois. We came up with a 2-pager, and these were several organizations, several nonprofit organizations that were working together, including, SEEN and the social or the Equity Illinois Coalition and Equity and Transformation. And we had this 2-pager that I think we thought it was a great start to amending some of the things that we saw wrong with the law and causing the issue that we had with the lottery. And so we took that to a few state legislators. And honestly, meeting with state legislators, that was my first time meeting with state legislators and organizing. And there were countless hours spent, and I didn't, countless hours by folks who were actually organizing these meetings and meeting with the legislators that you can't really get back. We had a lot of folks who said they understood our concerns and our suggestions, and that they would be taking it to Springfield, only for lame duck session to come and go and for us to see no movement at all. To me, it was like a huge slap in the face to a lot of these organizations who were putting, when I say a lot of hours, I mean, some people were putting in 10 to 12 hours a week, organizing and meeting with folks and coming up with solutions and amendments and whatnot. For me, it was really demoralizing. My morale was super low by January, and I wasn't spending nearly as many hours as some of those folks who are coming from those nonprofit organizations I just mentioned. So for me, I kind of felt like we were hamsters on a wheel, waiting for someone to drop, just a little something for us, whatever they could give us, crumbs at this point, so that this economy here in Illinois would be more diverse and equitable. And not gonna lie, I was like, maybe it's just not gonna happen, and maybe I need to look at doing something else. Maybe cannabis isn't for me. So my business partner, Lynette, actually was the one that was like, well, maybe we need to think about what's the most immediate way, or what immediate way we can impact the cannabis industry without having to wait on legislators. And that's kind of how the conversation started. It was, why are we waiting for someone else to give us what we're asking for? How can we just start at, make an immediate impact and start wherever we can? Like, where can we start without having to wait for someone else to give it to us, give us the keys? And this is how the idea came up for us. So we were talking to several cannabis companies like, hey, we want to foster more diversity and inclusion and equity in the cannabis industry through job opportunities, specifically for those who have been just as impacted in America. It wasn't until we had the conversation with Curaleaf where Curaleaf was like, absolutely, we 100% agree. In fact, we want 10% of our workforce to actually come from that population. And so that's how it came about. And Danielle with THC Staffing came about because she's one of our strategic partners. She understands the idea of diversity, equity, inclusion across the board, not just from an ownership perspective, but from a job opportunity perspective and an ancillary business opportunity perspective. So it just made sense for us to bring Danielle on board, especially with her specialty on the West Coast. So we have been working in Illinois, Ohio, Michigan, New York, Massachusetts, New Jersey, Oregon, Nevada, Arizona, California, to bring people, Americans who have been impacted by the justice system, into the cannabis industry in whatever way we can. And that's not just entry-level positions, it's all the way up through C-suite. The end goal is to be able to bring on ancillary companies that aren't plant touching in the cannabis industry into this initiative, so that we don't have as many barriers to entry when it comes to the badging process from state to state. The ultimate end goal is to actually take what we learn in the case studies to the legislative level at each state that we're working in, as well as the national level legislatively, to make sure these aren't going to be barriers moving forward.
Wow. I mean, this is exactly what is needed throughout the United States, and you're paving this way. It sounds challenging, though, to work in more than one state and, with compliance and regulations. How are you finding that going?
100%. Each state is different. 100% as far as badging goes, as far as what's considered acceptable to work in the cannabis industry, which is, I think, another thing that we need to work on when it comes to the time or the point where we legalize nationally, is we need to all kind of be on the same page, because you're absolutely right. Every state has its own set of issues. So we are leaning on the organizations and the people who are already working with this population, and who are, and then also with Curaleaf, obviously locally, with those hiring managers and those people that are coming from human resources, to actually figure out what are the barriers in that particular market. So, what may be a nonviolent charge in Illinois would actually keep you from possibly getting badged in a plant touching role, but it doesn't necessarily stop you from, getting an back office management operations role in Chicago, in the office setting. But in Massachusetts, it's totally different. It's, have you been caught and actually charged with distribution? It's literally different from state to state. So we're making sure we're working with nonprofit organizations that work with that population and understand the nuances of each state's law, but also working with the local human resources team with Curaleaf to make sure that we're really paying attention to those nuances and those gray areas as well.
Yes, exactly. Because I worked with our legislation in New York State, and, specifically saw how it was written, so that if you've got, and it just depended on, the whole criminal justice system, the way they've got it set up. If you could, that was the point. Hello, how do we get people into the industry? Exactly. If we're barring them because there's a past, this was supposed to be the inclusion, and the diversity in it. So, you've got a lot to figure out, and it's with Curaleaf helping, I would think that's going to, having somebody larger there to kind of help you get through each state is going to be a benefit.
100%. I think that we have a lot to learn as far as, because when you go get down to the root of the issue, you kind of, for me, it's like, why do we have this? Why is it written this way? Why is this a requirement in this particular state? Because like I said, each state is different. So why do we have random barriers, say, so for Illinois, just using Illinois as an example, if you have a violent charge, you can't work in the cannabis industry. Why?
Right.
And how do we define what's violent?
Exactly.
And then there's combined charges, and some things
Exactly.
are paper-based and haven't been digitized yet. So sorting through even to confirm something like what kind of charge is it?
Exactly. And when you think about it, so if we want to use folks who really have been harmed by the war on drugs, our legacy market dealers, just as an example, folks who did get charges for distribution, doesn't matter, even if it's within that limit that Illinois has set for you, getting in the cannabis industry. If we want to use that as an example, and this person, obviously got the charge, they probably got, like Danielle said, stacked charges. So they probably got charged for possession, which could possibly be a violent charge, right? So does that just, like, why? It just doesn't make sense. Like, why are we creating these unnecessary, arbitrary boundaries for people who literally built this industry and carry this industry for the last 40, 50 years? It makes no sense.
I love the way you're just simply saying it makes no sense, because that's exactly what I asked myself too. I thought, hey, I'm new in legislation and working with it. Is there something I'm not understanding? Because it just logically, it did not make sense.
Yeah, like if I see something here, what's this disconnect and this really glaring contradiction? And Illinois is a good example of this other layer of it, that some people qualified to apply for social equity licensing, but can't get through the background check to be an employee. So there are social equity definitions for ownership, but what about employment? And why is it so complicated? Why is it still so complicated? I mean, obviously it's going to take some time to work things out. It's like when you legalize something, it doesn't automatically free everyone who's behind bars for that. It takes time. Unfortunately, even when you say automatic expungement, it isn't automatic. It takes time to work through whatever system we're dealing with in a particular state or other jurisdiction.
So as you figure some of these things out and these roadblocks in the states you're working for, as it goes nationally, you're going to be able to present that, this information, these facts and these statistics that you're finding and working with, right? I mean, is this?
Yeah, that's the whole point. And Curaleaf, I think, understands that fundamentally as an organization. They realize that as an MSO, they kind of have the duty to provide these case studies, like real people going through real things that legislators, I don't think, really thought through when they were writing these laws, so that we can take it to the national level and say, hey, this has to change because you're affecting more people than I think you realize you are. We're talking about 70 million people that could be affected by the criminal justice system in America. That's a lot of people.
Yeah, it definitely is. I want to back up and just go into some basics in case some people listening aren't, really versed in this area. How would either of you can take this or help each other? How would you define equity versus equality? Equality is a word, and I think a lot of more people were probably accustomed to. And, instead of just the definition, when you look it up in the dictionary, what does it mean to both of you to have equity in the cannabis industry?
You want to go, Dan?
Sure, I can start. It's interesting you ask it at this point because when Shawnee was just mentioning how many people, 70 million, have a criminal record, the thing that comes to mind for me is everyone in the immediate families and support system of the 70 million. So it's not just people who, when we're speaking about social equity and how do we work towards that? It's really for everyone who's been most impacted. So starting with the people who have been incarcerated or otherwise carrying a criminal record, and then everyone in their immediate family and social support system. And not all of the people who have been most impacted by the war on drugs will want to work in the cannabis industry. Not everyone will want to be an owner. Ownership is not necessarily generational wealth. The way we what we're facing right now with the cannabis industry in the US is that it's debt. Ownership means you're taking on debt and a lot of legal risk. And if you've already been in the legal system, and obviously everyone who's been through it has had a bad experience with the legal system, why would you want to then take on this really high risk form of ownership or even employment, right? So to me, it's about community, reinvesting in communities who have been most impacted by policing, over policing, incarceration, lack of healthcare, lack of education, housing. So it's really getting to all of the needs and quality of life for communities that have been most impacted. So and how can we do that through the cannabis industry specifically, and why would companies have an obligation to do that? Goes back to some of our points we've touched on about how this industry came about. So this is not a new industry. It's newly legal and newly taxed and regulated. But this has been around, cannabis has been around as long as humans, probably longer. And for many decades, communities of color have been over-policed and prosecuted for these really minor offenses that really shouldn't have been a crime in the first place. Now, around 2010 is when I really started, and my co-founder for THC Staffing, we started focusing on the fact that, okay, this is turning into a multi-billion dollar profit industry. And there's this inherent hypocrisy just glaring that there's still thousands of people, people of color, Black, Brown, Indigenous people primarily locked up for things that white people are starting to make a bunch of money off of. And that's going to accelerate. It's going to only become a bigger and bigger problem as more and more money comes into this industry. So we have many lifetimes of work ahead of us to start to dismantle some of that and make this right.
I would just add the difference between equality and equity. If we really put it into perspective, equality is the idea that we're all treated fairly or the same. When it comes to those who have been affected by the war on drugs, unfortunately, it's disproportionately much more people who come from minority backgrounds. And so because it's disproportionately people who come from minority backgrounds, in general, minorities have been more affected by the war on drugs. And they're, just like Danielle said, their families have been affected, but it affects so much more. It affects their access to education, their access to any type of funding or loans, access to voting rights, access to housing, employment, and the list goes on and on and on. So that access creates almost like this invisible wall around those who've been affected by the war on drugs. And they literally have become a second class citizen just because of this charge or offense or this time that they've served because of a law that they broke. So it doesn't make them any better or worse than anyone else, but because of the American legal system, they are now considered a second class citizen. So because of that, they have everyone else has almost like a leg up. And so when we talk about equity, the idea of equity is to make sure that those who have been affected by the war on drugs, which, like I said, are disproportionately more minorities than anyone else, have a leg up so that they can have the same starting point, and less barriers to try and compete or get the same opportunities as other people who have not been affected by the war on drugs. So that's kind of the difference. Equality is really making sure that everyone is treated fairly or treated the same, gets the same treatment. But equity is really making sure that those who have been disproportionately impacted have the support they need in order to compete alongside everyone else.
Perfect. I love it. And that's exactly what you're all about, is training to give everybody that step stool to bring them back up to a level playing field, right? And what are some of the things that you do with this, with training and
So we do online training. We're a responsible vendor for the state of Illinois. So that means we train dispensary agents, folks who have gotten jobs in the cannabis industry in Illinois so they can get their dispensary agent card. And we also have online training, but we specifically work with a local college here in Chicago called Olive Harvey College. And we it's located on the south side of Chicago. And so we tend to work with the very population that we're trying to make sure it isn't left behind or left out of the cannabis industry. So those who are disproportionately impacted. And we serve on the advisory board with them. We develop curriculum there and actually teach classes along with some other folks that work on our team that teach classes there at Olive Harvey as well. It's really about making sure everyone has all the tools or keys to success, especially when it comes to the knowledge of the plant, so that they can go out and compete with whatever that may be. If that's competing with other candidates to get a position, or if that's competing to maybe start your own ancillary business, or maybe eventually competing in the next 5 to 10 years and hopefully getting your own plant touching business, whatever that looks like for that person based on their desires and their wants or aspirations, then that's what that is. So we teach several different classes. I mean, intro to cannabis, entrepreneurship with cannabis. I feel like one of the things that kind of makes me really anxious and nervous is I feel like we're kind of forgetting about ancillary businesses. And I'm afraid that those who've been disproportionately impacted by the war on drugs will look up one day and realize that ancillary businesses was another opportunity that they could have gone after without as much risk or barriers to entry. And so one of the things that I focus on when I'm dealing with folks who have been disproportionately impacted are making sure they know, like, hey, don't forget, they may, you may be getting distracted with the plant touching licenses and opportunities, but make sure you know that there are so many other opportunities that don't have anything to do with licensing at all or the plant at all that could create generational wealth for you and your family. Let me talk to you about what those look like based on your background, your experiences, and your skill set.
Yes. And look at both of you. I mean, you are both in the ancillary part of the cannabis industry. You're not plant touching. And so,
exactly,
excuse me, that, like you said, the barriers are lower. It doesn't have the fees for the licensing and the actual setting up of the business, is a lot more affordable. So whatever your skill sets are, you can, learn how to switch them and slide right into the cannabis industry with it. I mean, just about anything.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm so glad that, you touch on that too. I have a favorite definition with inclusion. And, everybody's like, to be inclusive, everyone's, let's say, invited to the dance, but then to actually be asked to dance, is true inclusivity.
Yeah.
And it sounds like those tools are what you can offer these people so that they can be actually dancing at the party, not just, oh, you're welcome to come. All our states have those regulations, the law says, oh, you're welcome to be in the industry too. Have fun trying to get there.
Right.
And licensing is really just the first hurdle. There's so much more to social equity after that for when you are talking about, ownership and a cannabis license, plant touching, because absolutely, I think people who have been impacted by the war on drugs should have priority in licensing if that's what they want, is to have a plant touching license. We need that. We absolutely need more diversity in the industry and ownership to be in the hands of people who have been most impacted. I'd like to see it flipped from where it is. It's over almost 90% white owned.
Yeah.
And I'd like white ownership to be maybe 10%, because white folks have really not been most impacted. Even those of us who have been incarcerated have a lot more resources to help us get shorter sentences, get treated better, and be able to recover from that experience. So it's a lot of work ahead of us, and social equity is not something you can check off a list like inclusion. Even inclusion, you can't, it's not a point in time that you reach and your work is done. We have plenty of work ahead of us. Also back to your question about, if our work is easier with support from a large company like Curaleaf, and obviously we do need companies to be supporting it, and hopefully more and more companies will start to do this work, because it does take time. It is complicated. And so the change isn't going to happen overnight, but the more companies that are doing it, and the more we can build out this kind of pipeline, and share experience, collaborate instead of compete, because this is not the kind of work we should be competing about. It's going to take everybody to work together on this.
Yeah, and it sounds like it's going to be evolving too, and it's going to be a constant, of trying to learn as it changes and find out what the new needs are, and as you learn, and then kind of formulating things as you go. With this Second Chance initiative, how do people get involved, and what is it really offering, for them?
What we find most with the justice impacted community is they are the most loyal population, hardworking population when it comes to other diverse groups. And so it's really giving that population the opportunity to get into the industry for those who are actually interested in getting in the industry. That's really what it's about. In order to get to participate and get involved, I would definitely say you can check out our website, illinoiseequitystaffing.com/initiative-FAQ. But you could also reach out to me via email or social media. We really just want folks to spread the word. I don't think a lot of people are aware that I don't think a lot of people are aware of the underbelly that is the barriers to badging in the cannabis industry. And I think the more we can kind of spread the awareness, even if you aren't justice impacted or you don't know anyone that's justice impacted, knowing that this is something going on in the industry and it's just egregious, and passing the information on to someone else is enough. We definitely want to raise awareness about this issue and these barriers to entry, but we also want folks who come from that population to feel open enough to submit their resume if they're interested, and they're in a state or a market that we're working in. Also, we want folks who maybe work with those individuals, people who work in the social justice arena, that work with justice impacted individuals, spreading the word as well. If they have, people that they work with, clients that may fit this population, just letting them know there's opportunities available in the cannabis industry. So that would be my answer to how folks can really start to participate and get involved with the initiative. We're hoping that Curaleaf is just the first of many organizations that starts to think intentionally about involving justice impacted Americans in the cannabis industry. And like I said, the moment we can get ancillary businesses to really start to think about this community as well, we're gonna really start pushing the envelope and breaking some new ground.
Well, it's one of the reasons we're having this conversation, for awareness, and let's get this word out so we can start trickling it out throughout the state, your state, and then all these other states too. So what's going on this summer and fall with you? So what programs are you trying to open up?
Well, we're really, the initiative, I think, is probably top of mind for us as a project. We almost everything that we're doing as far as programming and conferences and things like that, we'll be making sure that people know about the initiative. So, and we'll definitely be at CannaCon in Chicago or in Rosemont in August. I also plan on going to the Black Canna Conference in New Orleans in November. And yeah, sprinkled in between those things, I'll probably be speaking and doing presentations here and there. And then I also serve on the NCIA National Human Resources Committee. So there's a lot going on as far as, I don't know if people have been kind of keeping up, but basically the workforce is shifting, it's evolving. And I think June 2021 was like a record with the number of resignations in America. And so I think we are definitely we're shifting, and we're in like this weird period where I think employees understand that work-life balance and overall happiness does rely, unfortunately, on what you do for a living, and that some of these toxic environments are not worth it anymore. So yeah, that's what I'll be doing this summer is really making sure I focus on the initiative and making sure that whoever I work with has a great workplace and employee experience.
And it sounds like you have a beautiful family life that you're trying to, make fit into your busy work too. So
100%. I have a newborn.
yeah.
Yes. I have a 3-month-old that runs my life. That is my new boss. So
Your new boss. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
What's his name?
Josiah.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
And he's being so quiet right now. I was kind of hoping we might hear from him, but I know Mama's like,
Don't speak too soon. Oh, Jesus, don't speak too soon.
Yeah, he has a lot to say.
Well, Danielle, do you have more to add and what's going on? Are you two real close to each other, like in, proximity? I mean, do you really get to work face to face, or are you all virtual too?
We are both in the Chicago area, but haven't officially met in person to work, although we crossed paths before COVID, crossed paths at some events. Really? And we've been on many, many calls and meetings together in the last year and a half, some of the legislative work Shawnee was describing. So we really got to know each other through, just kept being in the same places, doing overlapping work. And that's part of how this current project happened, why we're working together. And I'm so grateful to be part of it and be able to combine networks, combine our knowledge of cannabis and recruiting, be able to look for candidates from each other's networks when we need to, or to compare notes. So I would say Shawnee's definitely the cannabis recruiter I work most closely with that isn't a part of THC staffing, for sure. It's been a joy because we can do more together, especially with this kind of work. It definitely takes collaboration, and also, like, there's so much going on in Chicago and Illinois. We're both really plugged in here, but also need to draw from other states, of course. So yeah, and this summer, similar focus, just focused on the Cure Relief Pipeline, and also THC Staffing has a mentoring program. So that's been one of our big projects this year that we've been working on for the last few years. It was part of our 10-year plan when we founded THC Staffing in 2014. So it's getting close to, we're in between 5 and 10 years of THC staffing, and have to make sure we meet some of those big picture goals because they're important steps along the way towards equity. We need more mentorship. Absolutely.
Definitely. You can kind of feel lost out there right now. So, to be able to start pointing people in your direction so that they can get a starting point, really, because sometimes you just don't know you just don't know what to do. I'm getting a lot of phone calls now and letters of just, where do I start? So I'm loving getting the network already built just by meeting you two women, so that we can start, like you said, that pipeline, just start shooting everybody through there. I did want to ask too, some states, like I know this is supposed to happen in New York, they're going to have grant money from the revenue from the taxes to go into programs like what you are. I figured something. Is that okay? Talk to me. What's going on?
Like I said, my morale is very low. I don't know, Danielle, if you want to talk about this, but we were supposed to see that here in Illinois, and I don't think what you see on paper, what's written on paper, sounds great. It sounds like a dream. It sounds like what it should be. And then when you see it actually come pass and executed, you're like, I don't think that's what we thought you meant when you wrote that, but okay. And so the tax revenue that you're speaking of, that's being I think our pot was 30 million this first year, and it ended up going mostly to state and municipal departments and organizations. And to me, that's just recycling the dollar within, that public sector. And I just don't feel that that's where it was supposed to go. And yeah, I have other things I could say, but I'm not going to. So,
and there will be more of that revenue. Hopefully there will be some movement around keeping track of where that money goes, and hopefully we can have an influence on it getting used as it was supposed to. But I'm with Shawnee on this, that like, unless there's clear regulations that kind of force things, we can't expect it to get implemented how it's intended or how we would hope. I can say something hopeful about some tax revenue that's been given out in grants through the city of Oakland. So Oakland, like in so many other movements, Oakland is an example of where there are some things happening that we can be proud of, and that if there were more programs like what's happening in Oakland, that would get us closer to where we. So similar concept of the tax revenue. Oakland has a social equity incubator, so it's a shared manufacturing space. So that's very rare. That one of the biggest barriers in this industry is real estate and equipment, especially for manufacturing. So City of Oakland's going right to the root of that, as far as, the business side of cannabis, that if social equity businesses can share space. And also the City of Oakland has a grant money going to cover paid training, so paid workforce development training for cannabis. So City of Oakland has the social equity licensee definition, but also a definition for social equity worker. Both are very problematic, very limiting. Like Illinois, like any social equity programs we do have, it's very limited, because how do you define who qualifies and what kinds of assistance do they get throughout the entrepreneurial process, or in the case of Oakland. And now this is happening in Massachusetts as well, as far as a track for employment. So there's a small scale project going in Oakland, but it could have a huge impact if other places start replicating that, the incubator model and the workforce development paid training.
Which is much better than money going towards, body cams to police officers.
Oh, no doubt.
Right. Oh, and I don't think I mentioned the group there in Oakland that's doing this is Supernova Women, by the way, for people who want to find out more about that.
Excellent. Well, boom. I mean, you just pointed out what we need to be looking for. So some of us states, like, sitting here in New York State, that's something we really got to look for, is to get very specific on how everything gets written in those regulations. And then, you know, the advocates, people wonder, oh, what are you going to do now? It's legalized. Excuse me. I think it's harder now because this is when the real work and the boots on the ground have to get in there and hold the accountability, get the regulations written correctly, learn from others and listen and keep our ears and eyes out there to learn from y'all and see how you can network together and help. You know, it is a community effort. It needs to be, you know, if we're going to get this to function. So I appreciate both of you so very much in what you're doing. And I look forward to learning more, watching you grow, and then seeing what we can, you know, keep connecting in more states and start sending people over to you as well. So, all right, go through and tell everyone listening how they can find you and information about this initiative.
Absolutely. So once again, our website is www.illinoisequitystaffing.com, but you could also check out information on the initiative by going to illinoisequitystaffing.com/initiative-FAQ, or you could hit me up on social media. I'm on LinkedIn, Shawnee Williams. Our company is on Facebook and Instagram under Illinois Equity Staffing. Feel free to direct message us, or, you know, shoot us a DM or whatever you're more comfortable with, or you can email us info@Illinois Equity Staffing, whatever you prefer, to get in touch with us regarding the initiative.
Excellent. And Danielle, how do people get a hold of you with THC Staffing?
Oh, sure. We're at THC Staffing on Instagram and Twitter, also THCStaffingGroup.com. But for this initiative, definitely use the contact information Shawnee mentioned. But same here, we're on most platforms. You can reach us however works for you. And I think on both of our websites, you can submit a resume through the website for general consideration or a specific thing that we have listed. So there's different ways to click around and find us.
Well, thank you so very much to both of you. And we will make sure that there are links, you know, involved with this video goes out, and they're on our website as well. So, you know, we'll make sure we can help connect everybody and help them find you.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You are so welcome. And I thank all of you for watching and hearing about this. And if you're new to the cannabis community, check out thecannabiscommunity.org, our website, and you can look at the directory. You can connect with communities and people who are kind of curious, just like you, and love to learn about cannabis and find out who's in this industry and how they can, you know, benefit, or how you can get in front of our community. So, all right. I thank you very much, ladies. It was wonderful to meet you. And we'll be talking again soon, I know. So
thank you for having us.
Thank you.